Okay. Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's episode. Um, just a quick, just to catch you up. You can say this is the second version of this talk. The first version was lost to time. So let's begin. The program of language. This sentence is so important that I hope, you know, it echoes in history. Because if a civilization doesn't become aware of this, they cannot evolve, they cannot advance. It's the barrier to any sort of civilization you can conceive. And it is also the next evolutionary phase. So something unique is happening, and I consider this right now, I'm speaking 2019. So something incredibly unique is happening to the psychological development of life forms on this planet. And nobody is talking about it because they have forgotten, not that they have forgotten, they have ignored one crucial point. And so I'm going to get into all of this. Uh, and that crucial point is that if there is 0.000, whatever amount of zeros you like, 1% chance that there is a multidimensionality to the core intelligence of this existential phenomena, then in some sense the definitions of one singular dimension will fall short. Now I'm going to explain how I even see the term dimensions and where this is going. So, ladies and gentlemen, we find ourselves on a rock in the middle of nowhere. This rock has had a very unique process go on its surface, as we consider, as the mainstream acknowledges, and hence the term evolution is suggesting how a sort of genetical intelligence continued. And in some sense it continued through an adaptation. So it's as if, like, regardless of how the soil was, the seed began sprouting and it began moving. And eventually, the creatures on this planet, first they separated. So what that means is that there was just the world here. And then something that was on the surface of this planet, in some sense, suddenly just separated itself. It began moving on the planet. It began becoming a creature of sorts. And of course, this was microscopically acknowledged, that there was like a part of our, like the intelligence that we consider evolutionary to have developed to us was on a bacterial level, survived a sort of meteor-like apocalypse, it is so considered. And so what I'm trying to say is that there has been certain conditions that a unique force of intelligence has continued. And this force of intelligence, in some sense, physically separated itself from the world. But the moment it physically separated itself from the world, it suddenly became also aware that it was separate. This awareness developed. It was like first a self took shape, an objective self came into position. Then this objective self looked at itself in the reflection of a pond or some giant ice or something, and eventually even saw its own shadow, and eventually became a singular acknowledgement. So what that means is there was an objective self, then the subjective self came. And then the subjective self at its core was the inner reality of the being, was the memory and the imagination of the being through evolution coming into position and development, coming into existential positions. And so the implication of this is that even they say your brain right now, when you look at this, your brain, there's different terms for different parts of the brain. For example, the reptilian aspect of the brain, and many other aspects like the frontal lobe and the left hemisphere and the right hemisphere, and just many ways that we have in some sense classified the brain. The reason is because the brain didn't just pop out of nowhere. In regards to the accuracy of the genetical material that is in a substratum kind of like way, like in the background, this sort of genetical intelligence updated the way it is. Okay, we see they like scientists even tried this on lab rats, and so first point, the brain, different parts of it took different years, like millions of years for different parts of your brain to develop, and for even the environment to change enough for the developmental opportunities to even arise. Okay, and so even scientists have checked on lab rats that if you like, they would scare the lab rats, and then the next generation of lab rats that were born held that fear with them. So there's so many factors that are influencing the child that is being born into this world. The child will have no idea of these factors, yet as its individual position, it will have to build something. You see, the point of life is building. You have to create. That's the point of the creation. So if you ask existence before existing how to exist, it will tell you just have to start. So what that means is the meaning of your life shifts in your dynamism, and your dynamism is conducted by your attention. And in the evolutionary phase, as this physical creature separated, it's separated from reality, not from reality. It's separated from the earth. So there was the objective evolution, and then there was a moment when the objective evolution became aware of itself, and that was the subjective evolution. And the subjective evolution, the inner reality of the person, eventually became more sophisticated as tribal dynamics emerged. In some sense, language became to be, the seeds of language were planted, and human beings eventually began communicating their inner realities. And language became, for the first time, that bridge that was like a world between worlds, allowing the two worlds to have commonalities and differences. You see, that the issue is not that people should be free or not free. The issue is that how the definitions of freedom arise in the members of a civilization that is always changing. This is why I felt there was a chance I had to study politics, and I didn't pursue it. I didn't pursue the politics, a degree in politics, simply because I felt the political system was behind, was very behind. Our political systems are old. Even though we feel they show new faces, but the system is old. And what that means is that the system is old because the system cannot potentially adjust to the citizen, especially when we have this whole technological revolution going on where we have people, futurists like Ray Kurzweil, coming and saying things, for example, in the sense of there's going to be a technological singularity around the year 2045 when pretty much technology becomes aware of itself. Man's creation becomes aware it is man's creation, and hence it updates quicker, and so no longer human beings are going to be the superior species on this planet. However, because technology is exponentially growing, so in some sense Ray Kurzweil suggested to the power of 10. So technology is ridiculously evolving, simply because the consumer's desire is vast, and at the same time the enthusiasm and the inspiration of the entrepreneur is as much as well. So anyways, the seasons change, yes, yet the core objective phenomena, the superior objective phenomena, remains. The program of language is how, through this evolution that we went through, the subjective evolution actually occurred through numerical language first, and then other sorts of language, you know. And the reason is because of the fundamental separation that had to occur. That means the number one was a effect of the subjective evolution. People having being able to consider that something could be singular, that could be something, that could be something, that could be something. So eventually we separated ourselves, then we separated the world, then we separated the world in our minds, then we in some sense found the world to be the same, one world in our minds, and then eventually the being realizes the forces that are taking, not taking shape, inspiring the shape throughout the day. That means some people, they put their karma into a story and they feel, oh man, why does this always happen to me? And they have these karmic kind of games they play with themselves. But karma in some sense is not a linguistic phenomena. It has to do more with your direct experiential awareness of life rather than your indirect subjective abstract notions of it. Ideas come and go. You know, it's like when the magnificence of the tree are not just in its leaves. The leaves change throughout the seasons, but it is the roots of the tree, which are in the soil, which we can't see. And in some sense, the human intelligence also has roots. However, these roots, just a second, guys. I gotta change the track. Life is all about awareness. It is not about a purpose in a story. It is not about the infinite ability of change of, in some sense, the linguistic simulation. Every person right now alive has a linguistic simulation. They have, in some sense, a way where language is being the world for them. And if they don't pay attention to language before they go on ontological expeditions of truth, they're going to find a sort of betrayal. This happens, and this is natural. It's pretty much the citizens suddenly understanding the way the world is designed has betrayed them, because it is in some sense an inevitable suffering of decomposition. So what that means is chaos is not holding back. Chaos is like, I am running at you, buddy. And so order is standing and I'm like, okay, chaos is coming, time is moving forward. In some sense, the ability and success of the species has to do with, in some sense, the movements and the patterns of intelligence it incorporates in its in the momentum of civilization's change. You see, it's like we have, with the stories we tell ourselves as human beings are not good, so we waste our lifetimes. And this is happening on a mass scale. It's as if we have not only the educational system has a totally wrong idea of what it means, what knowledge means. They have left it in the unknown. It's as if they've kind of, the truths of education are held in some ivory tower, but when we go look in that ivory tower, it's even empty. You know, it's like meeting God. Looks at a man, and in some sense, man finds an audience with God, and says, "Hey, God, why did you create me?" And God looks at man, and he's like, "Don't ask me, bro." And you know, the notion is simply that the edge of meaning must be acknowledged. You are as knowledgeable as you know the edges of what you don't know. And so what that means is, you tell me, which one do you think? Uh, 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 I'll give you two examples, and you tell me which kind of a teacher you want to see in the educational system. You tell me which kind of teacher you would like to see in an educational system, and totally forget who I am saying this. I'm just saying, imagine just the educational system and the way the teacher is. Imagine a teacher comes to class and writes one question. I feel every grade can be divided into one question. You know, I feel our education can be divided into questions that immediately take our attention to what is important for the civilization. Our educational systems should not be luxury. When they're treated in a luxurious way, it's not important. You see, Anyways, I'll continue. One example is a teacher who comes to class and the students are like, teacher, what are you going to teach us? At least the students are enthusiastic, okay? And the teacher's like, what they're telling me to teach you. So you guys pretty much have to memorize these things and at the end say it. And I'm going to check and see if you understand. And if you don't understand, you'll still pass. You see? The other teacher comes into class and says, kids, you will not be able... Let me see how I would structure this. So the first teacher is following, in some sense, being a sheep. The first teacher is being a sheep, just repetition, just being a cog in the machine. The second teacher, I'm trying to suggest, how would I say it? Imagine this teacher comes into class and writes a question on the board and sits still and silent. You know? And let me say it like this. One teacher comes and says, this is what I know. Another teacher comes and says, this is what the species doesn't know. Whichever one of you students can contribute to it, good job. You know, the history is waiting for your name. The history books. If you care enough for the world to advance. You see, it's like this. Imagine the world is like somebody you care about. Just imagine somebody you really care about. Imagine they're in front of you, and imagine they are in some sort of pain or they're getting beat up in front of you. And so imagine you begin to see your civilization getting beat up by forces that are not even in our language yet. We don't have words for them. But in some sense, there's so many factors. It's just nature's test. Nature is testing man. He's like, I will throw earthquakes at you. I will throw you the biggest winds. Will you stand? The truth is, in a changing world, change is the only truth. And the thing is that we are a simulation. That's what being a temporary being means. Okay, you're simulated. You are the elements of nature animated by some intelligence. Now, this intelligence is primarily ascribed to your brain. We are saying you are your brain. Okay, and I'm not denying that. The brain is obviously an important thing here. It's the projector. But the intelligence of the projector is a different debate. You know what I mean? That means the way the film that is projected from, imagine those old school projectors on the wall, the film has nothing to do with how the projector is made. So it's as if man has unseen forces challenging him. These unseen forces are just one example is time. The other is, for example, following the edge of desire. Eventually, you are in a natural world. This natural world has a sort of self-intelligence in every phenomena that's here. You see, so in some sense, the universe can be made into sectors of intelligence, sectors of behavior. The teacher that makes the child care for what they're teaching is a good teacher. The teacher that is just, how can I tell you? It's like, it's all about wondering why the word truth is in the dictionary, why it exists. Why does the concept of something being true exist? You have to, in some sense, have a very keen alertness. You have to have a wilderness of your attention. You see? And the proper state to function, these are general, just Mr.Within's recommendations. Externally, try to walk gently. I'm telling you, try to walk without imposition and simply be an observer. You know? Lao Tzu has this very incredible quote. He says, after the leader's task is done, the people will say we did it ourselves. So that means the greatest leading force is an invisible force. And I don't mean in the invisible, metaphysical. Oh my God, other things, beyond the veils of thought, beyond the veils of the sensory perception. I'm not. I'm trying to tell you guys. If we care about the world, we have to stand up. We have to. Our minds have to stand up in an authentic care. It's as if every person's mind should be an inspector of their civilization. You know, checking the maintenance of where it's leading. So the language program is very important. For me, I thought about it like I remember I often ponder in parks. Like I go to parks and I just sit on a bench and I'm like, okay, this simple existence is enough for me to contemplate things. And so as I sit there, my mind begins to wander and I'm like, okay, let's see. In this reality, we have the emergence of individual beings. And then I thought in my mind and I'm like, okay, in God, in religion, they're saying God is everything. So, and it's also the only thing here. So I'm like, it's as if we are individual thoughts of a collective being. So my metaphysical kind of curiosity in that moment took me to that imagery where I began to wonder, okay, so there's individual beings, so sure, let's say there's collective beings too. And then I wondered, how would I, like if I saw a collective being, what would it look like? You know, I thought about this. And suddenly I realized a collective being could be said to be one design moving and influencing many other designs at the same time. So I thought about it and then I suddenly recognized ideology, language. Language is where I have seen a collective being before. You know, and it was a very profound moment when I was sitting on that park bench. It was like as if like a sudden, it was no longer a goosebump level awareness. It was kind of like a shock, like as if electromagnetically by your attention shifting, the way you exist changes. So there's two ways to, in some sense, be in this world. One way is to be in the world and to be of it, and another way is to be in the world and not of it. To be in the world but not of it. This is something we find in Christian wisdom. It seems to be a quote that came from the Christ. To be in the world and not of it. The meaning is that you are present. There is a presence of a continuing intelligence where the urge of evolution arises from this field. And then there is to be in the world and to be of it. That means you're defined by what you see. And the mystical approach, which is very uncommon, I find nowadays, is the approach where the world is not accepted too soon. Efficiency has to be wondered about. The bells of efficiency must be rung and the whole village must be like, holy shit, something's happening, you know? And we all wonder. It's like, if you think about it objectively, it's a tragedy. If you think about it, if you think about it subjectively, if you suddenly no longer see people walking on the street, you see intelligent forces of mind, intelligent positions. These intelligent positions have as much value as they consider their own intelligence. You know, and so this is something I say, the person who made the IQ test has a very low IQ, had an incredibly low IQ, you know, because he thought that intelligence can be measured. It's dynamic. It's a dynamic kind of you ride the waves. It has to do with rhythm. It's like you can't grade horse riding, you know. Unless the guy falls from the horse, you can grade that. You know? The whole notion is that we have accepted our measurements too soon, and life has kind of been cornered to a sort of boring linguistic simulation, and so people are objectively shy and subjectively arrogant. And this occurs. The civilization is roaring with like idol worship back in the day. Now it's kind of like, you know, like TV. How can I say it? It's the idolization of people. Okay, We've gotten rid of the concept of God, so we've devolved back to idolizing people, worshiping people. But we don't worship ceremonially, we worship anything that holds your attention, you're worshiping. You know, that's the point. That it's taking your attention. When I walk in the streets of Iran and I have a conversation, you know, with a friendly person there, and when I walk in the streets of Canada and I have a conversation with a friendly person here, the conversations arise with me seeing that where their attention is. That's when you know there's something wrong. You know, for example, especially if you, anybody who's in a family dynamic, like you know this with your family members. If one day they come home and they suddenly are upset, you know that it's like, you know, if the nature of their attention. Okay? And so Mr. Within is simply saying, why not give the youngest kids in schools the hardest problems? Why not evoke a sort of playful divine way where the species is like, okay, ancient world, okay, old world who doesn't want to change fast enough, you know, you guys continue your program. It's as if suddenly they freed the prisoners, but they in some sense made the people more safe. Do you see? It is this notion of, rather than you controlling the world, which is like, you know, good luck trying to push a building, but a person in some sense has to realize this nature is a living phenomena where every moment's existence is by itself divine. The secrets of this world are not outside, they're in your attention. So when you study your attention, you start in some sense shaking the linguistic simulation. When you shake the linguistic simulation, the way the subjective realm has defined your objective realm nullifies. So you in some sense suddenly, it's as if you've pressed the refresh button and the web browser's like kind of refreshed. You know, Command R and suddenly it's refreshed. So what that means is how you're browsing, how you are in some sense, your attention is opening up to this world, finds itself free before the world gave it any sort of definition. In that moment, you become what I consider a true individual. An individual who you have taken off the clothing of your conditioning. And now the self-expression can originate authentically. Anytime you do something where in your mind you think you're doing something else, but outside you're just doing one thing, do you know the karmic inefficiency that brings? The mind and the body work best when they're aligned. The mind moves thoughts, or thoughts move in its view, and your body moves particles. What it is an objective movement. So this objective movement and the movement of various subjective classifications, just concepts and ideas and just abstract imagery in your cellular planes, like as you acknowledge these, you'll eventually see when a person's physical body moves, and also they are not lost to one thought, they are also kind of surfing through various ideas. You know, there comes a sort of rhythm, there comes this dynamism, and this dynamism immediately snaps out the notion that you are a body howling a brain, and at the same time snaps you out of the notion that you're a mind moving a body. Suddenly the world becomes language free. It doesn't mean language is gone. You have just stepped out of a vehicle you thought you had to be in your whole life. That's the thing. Nobody should live in a vehicle. Vehicles are designed for temporary transport. Do you see? So the attention has to be studied. The attention has to ask itself, what am I? What is here? You know? And any person, think of it this way. Existence brings it with itself one burden which unfortunately all human beings must bear. And that is to continue their exploration. That is the one command meant to follow. This science project we call humanity, it took 1 billion years, like 4 billion years or something, for it to get here. And when I see certain people having certain ideas and being obsessed and unfortunately, tragically using bridges the wrong way, and I see that in some sense, ideas have owned them. When you're stressed and depressed, ideas are devouring you. Thoughts of a certain way things have to be are devouring you. You have to step out. You have to, in some sense, you're like in that instant, nothing's going to happen, because fundamentally ideas change. My recommendation to anyone who in some sense has reached a sort of, like, throughout the day, life pushes you into different states of being, you know whether you like it or not, stretching from the food that you eat to just the air that you breathe, and kind of the atmosphere of your subjective reality, and many things like these influence who you are and how your attention moves. So first, in studying the nature of your attention, you remember something that the Yoga Patanjali Sutras said, that by nature is occurring. They said that, somebody asked, like they said, the notion of the soul is like a glass orb. And this glass orb is moving through various colors and colored surfaces, and whatever surface it moves in, it takes the shape. So fundamentally, the psychology of the human being seems to be attributeless, because its attributes change. So we ask, where is change happening, and we find the attributeless. And what I can tell you, anybody who is playing, who has ever, like, the idea of a video game has entered their mind, you tell me what language is. You tell me if language is not a program where the actions of the being, it doesn't matter which generation it is born, because the culture behaves that way. What choice does the child have? This is why I say the black sheep of the world are actually the ones who truly see uh, how, in some sense, pure the world is. Sometimes chaos sees order in ways that order could never see itself. And it's vice versa with chaos. And that's the magnificence of the world. Our eyes have opened, and there's something going on. And we can choose to just sit in our ideology all day, or we can choose to, in some sense, initiate something. That means I'm like, how would my ancestry honor me? As a kid, I thought of it. I'm like, okay, what could I do that my whole ancestry and lineage, if they're like, when I was younger, I mean, it's how can I tell you? Since a young age, I knew there was more than matter here, because I saw myself in the mirror. And what I saw in the mirror was not me, was the attention within me. It was a moment. We are not personalities, we are moments. We are moments where the attention restructures, realigns, and redesigns itself. And hence the program of language is just environment. Language defines the environment, and because your consciousness takes the shape of the environment, like that glass orb in some sense, I guess even Marcus Aurelius could interject here and say, the soul is dyed with the color of its thoughts. The color of the environment's natural design. So for example, we see like a rock star on stage, suddenly that rock star goes into like he's playing this crazy riff, and at the same time singing, and the alignment of his singing and the music is so uniquely aligned that in some sense you see it's as if intelligence is a sort of playing with your world all the time.